Something was wrong with the map. Not the borders, not the names, the emptiness. In 1680, one of the largest land empires on Earth appeared on European maps. It stretched across northern Asia, covered millions of square kilometers, and was labeled with a single name: Tartaria. Then, less than 150 years later, the name vanished completely. Not conquered, not divided, erased. History says it never existed, but the ruins say otherwise. For centuries, travelers crossing Siberia described enormous abandoned cities buried beneath snow and mud. Cities with stone roads wider than anything Europe had at the time. Massive towers standing alone in empty plains. Domes, arches, canals, and foundations, too advanced for the scattered settlements officially recorded in the region. Most of those reports disappeared into archives no one reads anymore. One Dutch explorer wrote about entering a city near the Ob River, where entire streets stood empty. The buildings were intact, the windows unbroken, tables still inside the homes, but there were no people, no bodies either, just silence. At first, historians dismissed these accounts as exaggerations, explorers lying to secure funding, travelers confusing ruins with active cities. But the problem is that the descriptions kept repeating. Different witnesses, different decades, different locations. Yet the same impossible details appeared again and again. Massive abandoned infrastructure, advanced architecture, and signs that whatever civilization built it vanished suddenly. Then came the maps. The older you go, the stranger they become. European cartographers from the 16th and 17th centuries consistently labeled huge portions of Asia as Great Tartary. Some maps divided it into regions: Chinese Tartary, independent Tartary, Russian Tartary, not wilderness, not unexplored territory. A political entity, an empire, and not a small one. Some of these maps portrayed Tartary as larger than every European kingdom combined, which creates a problem historians struggle to explain. How does an empire that large disappear almost completely from modern education? Because empires leave records. Rome left records. Persia left records. The Mongols left records. But Tartaria exists like a ghost, visible everywhere, acknowledged nowhere. And then I found something even stranger: architecture. Across Russia, Eastern Europe, and parts of Asia, there are buildings that officially should not exist. Enormous stone structures with impossible foundations. Cathedrals with giant bronze doors. Government buildings with columns cut from single blocks of granite, weighing hundreds of tons. The official explanation is always the same: built by hand. But when engineers started examining some of these structures, the timelines stopped making sense. Some buildings would have required stone transportation systems, more advanced than what officially existed in those regions at the time. Others showed signs of precision engineering, impossible to replicate without industrial equipment. Yet many were supposedly built before those technologies existed. And then there are the buried floors. This is where things start becoming difficult to ignore. In city after city across the former Tartarian regions, entire ground floors sit beneath modern street level. Windows buried underground, doorways leading into dirt, staircases descending into what should have been street entrances. Officially, historians blame this on urban sediment accumulation. But the scale is absurd. In some cities, entire first stories are submerged beneath several meters of earth. Not one building, thousands. As if the ground level itself suddenly rose, or the cities were buried. Some researchers believe these buried structures are evidence of a catastrophic mud flood. Others argue the cities were intentionally covered during massive reconstruction projects after some unknown disaster. Whatever happened, it happened on a scale modern history barely acknowledges, and the timing becomes extremely uncomfortable. Because around the early 1800s, something changed everywhere. Massive fires erupted across major cities around the world. Moscow burned, Washington burned, large sections of New York, Philadelphia, and Boston burned. Entire districts vanished in days. Official records blame wars, accidents, and poor firefighting systems. But eyewitness descriptions sounded almost apocalyptic. People described skies turning white, heat so intense, metal warped, and winds generated by the fires themselves. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash faster than physically possible. And after the destruction came rebuilding, rapid rebuilding, suspiciously uniform rebuilding. Cities that once contained strange oversized architecture suddenly became filled with more standardized designs, with simpler buildings, smaller windows, narrower ceilings, and less stonework. It was almost as if a previous world had disappeared, and someone had rushed to replace it. Then the photographs started appearing. Early photographs from the mid-1800s contain details no one can fully explain. Gigantic, empty cities, miles of streets with almost no people, entire capitals appearing, half abandoned. Photos from San Francisco, Chicago, Moscow, and Paris often show monumental architecture with strangely tiny populations around them. Officially, exposure times made photographing crowds difficult. But that explanation does not fully work. Some images show construction crews, horse carriages, individuals standing still. Yet the streets remain unnaturally empty. One theory suggests these cities were recovering from repeated waves of catastrophe. Another possibility is far stranger. What if the populations capable of building these places were already gone, and the people who inherited the cities simply occupied the remains? That would explain something historians almost never discuss: the scale mismatch. Many old government buildings, train stations, cathedrals, and theaters appear massively oversized for the populations officially living there at the time. Small frontier towns, somehow constructing enormous stone capitals. Remote cities building cathedrals that would challenge modern engineering budgets. Settlements with dirt roads, somehow producing architecture that rivals imperial Rome. The official explanation is ambition. But ambition does not cut granite with impossible precision. And it does not explain why the same architectural style appears across continents. Domes, arches, star forts, massive columns, identical city layouts, as if they belonged to a connected civilization. Then there are the star forts. This is where the mystery becomes impossible to dismiss. Across Europe, Russia, Asia, and the Americas are thousands of giant star-shaped structures visible from above. Perfect geometric formations, too massive to fully appreciate from ground level. Officially, they were defensive military forts designed to resist cannon fire. But many make no strategic sense. Some were built in flat regions with no military value. Others faced impossible directions. And many are so mathematically precise, they resemble engineering diagrams more than battlefield structures. Even stranger, the same designs appear worldwide. Different cultures, different governments, different languages. Yet the same geometric patterns repeat over and over again, almost as if they came from a single source. A unified system, a civilization with shared knowledge. And then the records start disappearing. By the late 1800s, references to Tartaria shrink rapidly. Maps change. Encyclopedias rewrite definitions. Former regions become absorbed into new national identities. The term itself slowly transforms from empire into vague geography, then, eventually, into myth. Most people today have never even heard the name. That is the part that disturbs researchers the most. Not that civilizations collapse. Every civilization collapses eventually. It is the speed of the disappearance. Within only a few generations, one of the largest entities on old maps became something historians barely mention at all, almost as if memory itself had been removed. And maybe that is the real story. Not a hidden empire, not secret technology, not even catastrophe, but erasure. Because history is not just written by victors, it is simplified by survivors. After every major collapse, people rebuild with fragments, incomplete records, half-remembered stories, broken maps, ruins no one fully understands anymore. Over time, myth replaces memory, and eventually the old world begins to sound impossible. Maybe Tartaria was exactly that, a fragmented memory of a civilization too large, too old, or too interconnected for later historians to properly explain. Or maybe the evidence means something worse. Maybe humanity inherited cities it did not build. Maybe entire chapters of history were compressed into simplified narratives because the real story would force us to question everything we believe about civilization itself. Because when you look closely enough, the pattern keeps repeating. Buried foundations, impossible architecture, missing records, abandoned cities, sudden fires, massive reconstruction, and underneath all of it, the feeling that something enormous happened. Something the modern world was never supposed to remember. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more history mysteries.